I'm going to start my story of revenge in a slightly unusual way. So, let's start. You ever have one of those friends who somehow manages to be both the best and worst person you know? Like, the guy's a human Molotov cocktail. You never know whether he's about to warm you up or burn the whole damn house down. Well, meet Eric Malone, my lifelong buddy and walking natural disaster. Eric's not just a person, he's a phenomenon. If there's a way to turn any mildly inconvenient situation into a full-blown catastrophe, you better believe Eric's already perfected it. Hell, the guy once got kicked out of Walmart for taking over a cash register when he didn't even work there. His response? Well, someone had to do it. The line was too long. We've been friends since we were dumb kids in a small town. Me? I grew up, went to college, got a job, and like the dumbass I was, married Hannah Peterson. Hannah was hot. Not oh she's cute hot. No, I'm talking, this woman could make a priest consider renouncing his vows hot. Blonde hair, perfect curves, and a pair of legs that probably violated traffic laws. Here's the thing about guys like me, men who think with their dicks tend to marry women with enough red flags to start a communist parade. Did I know Hannah was high maintenance? Sure. Did I care? Not when she looked like the centerfold of every teenage fantasy I ever had. Hannah and I made it about 3 years before the cracks started showing. I don't know exactly when things started to go south, but suddenly, the woman I married became a stranger. She'd smile less, go out more, and her phone? Might as well have been surgically attached to her hand. I'd ask her what was wrong, and I got the usual canned bullshit, it's nothing. I'm just tired. You know the drill. Then one day I came home from work, and there it was, her wedding ring, sitting on the kitchen table like a little piece of shame. She didn't even have the decency to break it to me face to face. Nope. I got served papers with the classy irreconcilable differences line. In case you're wondering, irreconcilable differences is legal code for I've been banging someone else. So there I was, 32 years old, alone, confused, and freshly divorced. Eric came back to town just as my life was crumbling, fresh out of his 4-year stint in the army. Now, Eric didn't join the military because of some noble sense of patriotism. Nope. He joined because a judge, a friend of his, told him, the army or prison is your choice. You see, Eric pissed off half the town when he decided to test dynamite in a fishing reservoir. Bad news for the fish, good news for the army, who desperately needed guys who knew their way around explosives. The night Eric came back, I was throwing him a welcome home party. I'd just been served the divorce papers hours before, but I wasn't about to ruin the evening with my pity party. Eric, however, is a human lie detector wrapped in sarcasm. The moment I hugged him, he pulled back, narrowed his eyes, and said, "What the fuck's wrong with you?" "Nothing," I lied. He wasn't buying it. We drank our way through half the bar before we ended up in a greasy diner at 3 a.m., just the two of us. That's when he pried the story out of me. Hannah left, I muttered, staring at the bottom of my coffee mug. Filed for divorce. I don't know why. Eric stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. So who's she flucking? I blinked at him. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Bullshit, Eric interrupted. If a woman leaves for no reason, it's because there's another dilk in the picture. Period. I didn't argue. Eric's logic was brutal, but he wasn't wrong. Okay, Eric said, leaning back with a devilish grin. Here's the plan. We fuck up her life. Then we find out who she's flucking, and we fuck up his life too. For real? I asked, a small bitter smile breaking through. Of course. She's gone. You can't cry about it now. She burned the bridge, so let's make sure it stays on fire. And just like that, the Eric I knew was back. The same chaotic lunatic who once tried to take down the Chuck E. Cheese mascot because that rat's been terrorizing kids for too long. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. I asked him how he planned to do it. Don't worry about it, bro. I've got this. I really should have worried about it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of voices outside. I stumbled to the window, still groggy and hungover, and what I saw nearly made me spit out my coffee. My driveway looked like a flea market on steroids. Tables were set up everywhere. My furniture, clothes, appliances, hell, even my golf clubs, were laid out like garage sale offerings. A large hand-drawn sign in Eric's sloppy handwriting read, "Cheating S.L.U.T sale, everything must go." I stormed outside, coffee in hand, where Eric was happily haggling with a woman over Hannah's old jewelry. "Eric!" I shouted. "What the fuck are you doing?" Eric looked up casually. "Morning, sunshine. I'm making you some money. You're selling all my stuff?" "Nah, just the stuff that belongs to Hannah. Or stuff that looks too classy to belong to you." I didn't even argue. The truth was, I didn't care. Hannah's stupid decorative vases? Gone. Her expensive cookware that we never used? Adios. "You're insane," I muttered, shaking my head as Eric handed me a wad of cash. "Oh, it gets better," Eric said, pulling a folder out of his pocket. "Turns out your wife's a dumbass. She didn't log out of her email on your computer." "What?" He slapped the folder into my chest. "Her inbox. Turns out she's been fucking some guy named Mark from her office. They've been at it for months. Oh, and she sends him photos." "You're welcome." I stared at the printed emails, my stomach twisting. There it was in black and white, photos, messages, and plenty of sickeningly sweet, "I can't wait to see you" bullshit. Eric grinned. "Told you she was flucking someone. I'm always right." I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or punch something. Instead, I grabbed a lawn chair, sat down, and watched Eric sell Hannah's wedding dress to a grinning old lady for $20. "It's a classic," Eric said with a straight face. $20. I asked. "Fluck her," Eric replied with a shrug. "She got off cheap." By the time the Cheating S.L.U.T sale wound down, my house looked like it had been hit by a minimalist tornado. The place was damn near empty except for a couch, a TV, and a bed, the bare essentials for a recently single man who didn't give a crap about interior design. Eric, meanwhile, was packing up a large box marked Hannah's stuff in bold black letters. "What's left?" I asked, taking a sip of the beer he'd handed me earlier. "Just some of her personal crap," Eric replied. He was taping the box shut with a level of satisfaction that should have been concerning. "Her parents' place is only a 10-minute drive, right? We'll drop this off there so she doesn't have a reason to come back." "You're way too eager to help," I muttered, though I didn't really mind. "Fine. Let's get this over with." We pulled up to Hannah's parents' house a little after 4 p.m. I knocked on the door, box in hand, while Eric leaned casually against the truck, watching with that shit-eating grin of his. Hannah's dad, Bill, answered, looking tired and uncomfortable, like a man who'd been getting an earful from his daughter all day. "Hey, Bill," I said flatly. Bill sighed and stepped aside to let us in. "She's been staying here the last few nights," he admitted, as though I'd asked. "She's going through a lot right now." I bit back the sarcastic reply hanging on the tip of my tongue and just handed him the box. "Here's the rest of her stuff. I signed the divorce papers yesterday, so I guess this is all that's left." Bill looked at me with an expression that teetered between guilt and pity. "Look, son. I'm sorry about everything. I didn't know she was." "You knew," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "Don't lie to me, Bill." He looked at the floor. "Yeah, I knew. Of course he did." I didn't even have the energy to be mad about it anymore. Bill was just another casualty of Hannah's bullshit, forced to play the role of supportive parent while his adult daughter acted like a high school drama queen. I shook my head and turned to leave when something caught my eye. The box. The lid had popped open slightly, and from where I was standing, I caught a glimpse of something large, pink, and extremely inappropriate sticking out of the top. My eyes widened, and I shot a look at Eric, who was still lounging by the truck, looking far too pleased with himself. Bill noticed too. "What the hell?" I turned back just in time to see him lift the lid. Out came a 12-inch rubber dido with comically large, hairy balls. I swear to God, the thing looked like it belonged in a parody porn film. Tucked neatly next to it was a stack of big black Calc DVDs, a bottle of cheap lube, and because Eric always takes it too far, a red fire extinguisher. "What is this?" Bill sputtered, his face going pale as he dropped the dildo like it was radioactive. I could barely contain my laughter as I turned to Eric, who was laughing out loud as he came closer to us, probably to get a better look at the scene in Bill's face. "Eric, you son of a bitch!" I shouted, unable to hold back any longer. He just shrugged innocently. What? She's gonna need that extinguisher after all the hot action she's been getting. Bill looked like he was about to have an aneurysm, which only made Eric laugh harder. I grabbed him by the arm and dragged him back to the truck before things got any worse. As I slammed the door behind me, I finally let myself burst out laughing. Are you out of your goddamn mind? I managed between gasps. Eric grinned as he started the truck. What? I included everything she'll need for her new life. I'm nothing if not considerate. Where the hell did you even find that Dido? The internet, bro. You can buy anything on there these days. I shook my head, still laughing as we pulled out of the driveway. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Bill standing on the porch, looking at the box like it might bite him. I didn't envy him when Hannah came home. We got back to my place in time to crack open another round of beers and collapse on the couch. I was just about to settle in when my home phone, yes, I still had one of those, started ringing. I glanced at Eric, who gave me an expectant look. Go on, he said, smirking. It's showtime. I picked up the phone and braced myself. You asshole. Hannah's voice screeched through the receiver, so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What the fick did you put in that box? Excuse me. I replied calmly, shooting Eric a glare as he stifled his laughter with his beer. You know what I'm talking about, Alex. My dad saw everything. And the DVDs? Really? Calm down, Hannah, I said, my tone deliberately patronizing. I don't know what you're talking about. Eric packed the box for you. Maybe you should take it up with him. Eric. She shrieked. That psycho is ruining my life. Eric gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Is there anything else, Hannah? I asked coolly. Yes. I know about the flyers. Flyers? I glanced at Eric, who just smiled and winked. What flyers? The ones with me and Tim, you bastard. They're all over town. My work, the coffee shop, everywhere. Ah, so that's what Eric had been up to while I was napping earlier. Tim. I asked innocently. Who's Tim? Hannah let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a scream before hanging up on me. I looked at Eric, who was now doubled over in laughter. Flyers, huh? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, Eric said between gasps. I may have printed a few thousand and paid some local teens to spread them around. What did they say? He handed me a copy. It was a grainy photo of Hannah and a man I vaguely recognized from her office, Tim apparently, in what could generously be described as a compromising position. The caption read, "This is Tim. He's not her husband. Just thought you should know." I stared at the flyer for a long moment, then looked back at Eric. You're insane, I said, shaking my head. Eric just grinned. She flucked around, bro. Now she finds out. The fallout from Eric's flyer campaign was swift and brutal. By midweek, Hannah's workplace had turned into something straight out of a sitcom, if sitcoms had more cheating scandals and fewer laugh tracks. I didn't have to hear it from her directly. Word got around fast in a small town, and well, Hannah wasn't exactly subtle. Tim, her co-star, didn't fare much better. Apparently, his eligible bachelor status had gone public in ways he never intended. Flyers were taped to car windshields, pinned to bulletin boards, and someone, likely one of Eric's teenage minions, went the extra mile by sticking them on utility poles all around the office parking lot. Imagine walking into work on Monday morning only to find your private affair turned into town-wide entertainment. Poor Tim. A few days later, I was grabbing a coffee downtown when I spotted Tim himself. He was sitting at a corner table, hunched over and looking like he'd aged 10 years in the span of a week. If I'm being honest, he looked like shit, disheveled hair, bags under his eyes, and a defeated slouch that screamed, I made some poor life choices. I don't know what possessed me to approach him. Maybe the little devil on my shoulder whispered, "Fluck it, let's stir the pot." Either way, I grabbed my coffee, walked over, and sat down across from him. "Tim," I said, offering him a cordial smile. His head snapped up, his eyes going wide. "Alex. How's it going, man?" I sipped my coffee, savoring the awkward tension. "Look, he swallowed hard. I didn't mean to ruin my marriage." I interrupted calmly. Sure you did. It doesn't just happen, Tim. He looked ready to crawl under the table and die. I didn't think you'd find out. Yeah, well, I set my coffee down and leaned in slightly. Turns out you and Hannah aren't exactly criminal masterminds. But hey, on the bright side, you made the flyers. Tim groaned and buried his face in his hands. Jesus, the flyers. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. I hear HR wasn't thrilled. They weren't, he muttered. I'm on probation. Sounds rough, I said, letting my words drip with mock sympathy. Guess you'll think twice before banging another man's wife, huh? Tim looked at me, utterly defeated. Alex, is there any way you could get whoever's doing this to stop? Oh, Tim. Sweet, naive Tim. I don't know what you're talking about, I said with a shrug, feigning innocence. Maybe karma's just working overtime on you. Tim didn't say anything. He just stared into his coffee, clearly regretting every decision that led him to this point. I left him there, slumped and miserable, while I walked out into the sunshine feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The next stage of Eric's revenge plan came out of nowhere. I didn't even know about it until the home phone, yes, still there, rang off the hook one Saturday afternoon. The screaming on the other end was unmistakable. Hannah. You fucking cowards. You think this is funny? Hello to you too, Hannah, I said dryly. What's the problem now? The restaurant. The shame. The flucking bell. I blinked. What bell? Her voice pitched higher. Red Lobster, Alex. Red flucking lobster. I hung up, turned to Eric, who was sprawled on my couch eating chips, and raised an eyebrow. Red Lobster. He grinned like a kid on Christmas morning. Wanna see? He pulled out his phone and hit play on a video. What I saw nearly made me choke on my beer. The footage opened with Maria, Eric's new accomplice, marching through the local Red Lobster in a flowy dress with a giant brass bell in hand. Behind her was Juan, Eric's buddy from the VFW, dressed like the High Sparrow from Game of Thrones. For anyone unfamiliar, just picture a stern-robed man radiating judgmental authority. Maria started ringing the bell, clang, 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 while yelling at the top of her lungs. Shame. Shame on the cheating slut. The camera panned to Hannah and Tim, who were sitting at a corner booth, mid-bite. Hannah's face turned ghost white, while Tim froze like a deer in headlights. Shame on you, Hannah Peterson. Maria continued, walking straight toward their table. Clang, clang, clang. And shame on her boyfriend, the marriage wrecker. Tim looked like he wanted to climb out the window. Hannah hissed, "Sit down, Tim," as people around them started pulling out their phones to record. Meanwhile, one stood solemnly by their table, shaking his head like a disappointed saint. The piece de resistance came when Maria pulled out a roll of duct tape, slapped it on the table, and said, "This is for when you tie up your next marriage, whore." I don't know if the Red Lobster manager kicked them out or if they just fled, but the video cut off as Hannah and Tim scrambled for the door, their faces beet red while customers laughed and clapped. When the video ended, Eric wiped tears from his eyes. Fucking masterpiece, right? Where did you find Maria and Juan? I asked, still processing what I just watched. Maria's ex-husband left her for her sister, so she's been dying to humiliate a cheater. And Juan? Well, he's just a fan of Game of Thrones. I couldn't help but laugh. You're gonna get arrested. Eric waved a hand dismissively. Nah. Juan's uncle's a cop. It's fine. Hannah must have seen the video because later that night, the home phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail, and Eric and I listened to her frenzied rant on speaker. You assholes. You humiliated me at Red Lobster. Everyone at work saw the video. I swear to God, when I find out who did this, I'll... Eric hit delete halfway through. Not worth hearing the rest. I asked. Nah, Eric said, cracking open another beer. Her voice makes me thirsty. The thing is, Eric wasn't done yet. For him, revenge is like a fine wine. You have to let it breathe, savor it, and serve it at the perfect moment. And the perfect moment was still coming. The days after the Red Lobster incident were blissfully quiet. Well, quiet for me. Hannah, on the other hand, was slowly coming unglued. Every few days, I'd get a voicemail filled with her signature mix of screaming, cursing, and the occasional sob. You know, the kind of voicemails that make you hit save, so you can play them on speaker when you're having a bad day. I figured Eric was taking a break. Maybe he was done. Maybe for once, he decided to show mercy. Yeah. I'm an idiot. It was a Thursday morning when Sheriff Greg Malone, Eric's uncle, showed up at my house. Now, Greg and I always got along fine. He's one of those small-town sheriffs who knows everyone, waves at every car that drives by, and probably hasn't drawn his gun in 20 years. I invited him in and handed him a beer because that's what you do when the sheriff shows up unannounced. He accepted, took a long sip, and then said, "Where's Eric?" I raised an eyebrow. "Mexico. He left last Friday with his new girlfriend." "Why?" Greg scratched his chin and gave me a look. "Well, someone vandalized Hannah's workplace." I froze. Define vandalized. The lawn. Someone used "we'd kill her" to write, well, words, in the grass. Words. I repeated. He gave me a long, pointed stare. "It says cheater in letters so big you can see it from the damn highway." At that exact moment, my home phone started ringing. I didn't need to check the caller ID to know who it was. I waved my hand dismissively. "I'm letting that go to voicemail." Greg snorted, clearly fighting a smile. "Look, I don't care who did it. I just have to ask where Eric was when it happened." "I told you, he's in Mexico. Can you prove it?" I grabbed my phone and dialed Eric. He picked up on the second ring, but instead of a greeting, I heard the unmistakable sound of a woman giggling in the background. "Hola, amigo," Eric said cheerfully. "Hey, Eric. Sheriff Greg is here. He wants to know where you are." Without missing a beat, Eric replied, "Tell him I'm balls deep in Margarita, my new girlfriend. Say hi, baby." A sultry voice chimed in. "Hi, Sheriff Greg." Greg's face turned red as he muttered, "Jesus Christ." Eric continued, "If you need proof, I'll email you my flight info. But I gotta go. Margarita's demanding my attention." The line went dead. Greg drained the rest of his beer and stood up. "You know, I don't officially condone vandalism. But damn if that isn't the funniest thing I've heard all week. I thought the cheater lawn would be Eric's grand finale. It was big. It was public. It was petty. It was classic Eric. But as it turns out, he had one last card to play. The following Sunday morning, my phone rang again, right on cue. I let it go to voicemail because, honestly, it had become a hobby. When I finally listened to the message, I damn near dropped my coffee. Hannah's voice was hysterical, not her usual pissed-off tone, but a full-blown "my life is spiraling out of control" breakdown. "You assholes. A midget. An Elvis midget. Church. Grandma. Strapo-NS. Tim. The whole flucking congregation." I blinked. What the fuck? Eric, who had returned from Mexico the night before, was already smirking. "I take it she enjoyed the show? What did you do?" I demanded. He grinned, grabbed his iPad, and handed it to me. "Watch." The video opened on the church where Hannah and I had gotten married. I immediately recognized the pastor, Old Man Clem, a guy who'd been preaching in town for 40 years. The congregation was quiet, pious, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. A moment later, a man appeared at the altar. And not just any man. This guy was a 4-foot-tall Elvis impersonator. He was wearing the full white jumpsuit, complete with rhinestones, aviators, and the iconic black wig. "Excuse me, Pastor," Elvis said, raising a hand. "I have a confession to make." The pastor blinked in confusion. Son, this isn't the time for. I've been fornicating with a woman in this congregation," Elvis declared, his voice booming through the church. The camera panned to Hannah, who was sitting in the second row, her face frozen in horror. Tim, sitting beside her, looked like he was about to bolt. "I know it's wrong, Pastor," Elvis continued dramatically. "But I just couldn't resist her. She used her strap-on to peg me while Love Me Tender played while I sucked on Tim's dilk, but I knew it was wrong because she was still married." The congregation erupted into gasps. Someone's grandma fainted in the third row, and her dad stood up and puked. Elvis wasn't done. He turned to Hannah, dropped to one knee, and pulled out a ring that looked comically large in his tiny hands. Now that your divorce is final, we can finally be together. Be my Priscilla, Hannah, he cried. I know you still love Tim, but I'll share you both. The camera shook as whoever was filming started laughing uncontrollably. Hannah's dad, poor miserable Bill, turned around, and again vomited into a pew. Tim ran for the exit like a man fleeing a burning building. Hannah just sat there stunned as Elvis waved at the congregation and shouted, "Hail to the king, baby." The video ended. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at Eric. You hired a dwarf Elvis impersonator to propose to her, in church? Eric shrugged. You only live once, bruh. Later that afternoon, Eric handed me an envelope. Here, he said, smirking. What's this? A wedding invitation, he replied nonchalantly. To what wedding? Yours, dumbass. You and Rachel need to lock it down. I looked at him, stunned. Rachel had been a mutual friend for years, a coworker of mine who always showed up to barbecues and birthdays. After the divorce, she'd been there for me. What started as casual support turned into something more. Wait. You're serious? I asked, still processing the suggestion. Dead serious. You're happy with her, aren't you? Yeah, but... Then don't waste time, Eric said, cutting me off. Life's short. Oh, and Rachel's new best friend Tasha is helping me pick out a ring for her. Wait, you're proposing to Tasha? Eric grinned that devilish grin of his. Hell yeah. We've been hanging out since the Cheating S.L.U.T sale, and let me tell you, she's wild. Perfect match for me. I shook my head, laughing. You're insane. And you're welcome, he replied with a wink. The end. Almost. A week later, Hannah received 2 wedding invitations, one to my wedding with Rachel, and one to Eric and Tasha's. Both were hand-delivered by a familiar face. When the door opened, the Elvis impersonator stood there, grinning ear to ear. With a dramatic flourish, he handed over the invitations and said in his smooth drawl, "Hail to the king, baby." Hannah's expression? Priceless. Game. Set. Match.